Effort is the most expensive narcotic in the world. We are fed the idea from the moment we can stand upright that sweat is the only currency the gods accept. We are told that if we bleed enough, if we sacrifice enough sleep, and if we grind our bones to dust, the universe will owe us a debt of gold. But the universe keeps no ledgers. And the hardest workers often die with the emptiest pockets, clutching nothing but the pride of their own suffering. In the sprawling, soot-stained city of Oakhaven, where the steam engines hissed like angry serpents and the sky was a perpetual bruised purple, Arthur Vane was the hardest worker alive. He did not say this with arrogance, he said it with the quiet, desperate certainty of a man who had nothing else. Arthur was a gear smith in the colossal foundries of the Iron District. Every morning, before the sun could even attempt to pierce the smog, Arthur was at his bench, his leather apron stiff with grease, his hands trembling slightly before the first heavy swing of his hammer steadying them. The foundry was a cathedral of noise. Clangs, shrieks of metal on metal, and the roar of furnaces created a symphony that deafened the soul. Arthur specialized in the transmission cogs, intricate, heavy brass wheels that kept the city's water pumps flowing. He took immense pride in his cogs. While other smiths would leave rough edges or tolerate a millimeter of wobble, Arthur filed his brass until it sang. He stayed late, long after the whistle blew, perfecting the teeth of the gears, ensuring they meshed with a silence that defied the chaos of the factory. He believed in the great exchange. It was the written religion of the middle class in Oakhaven. You trade your life, hour by agonizing hour, and eventually, the city rewards you with security, comfort, and perhaps a view of the clear sky from the upper terraces. Arthur had a plan. He calculated that if he produced 20% more gears than his peers for 10 years, the foreman would notice, promote him to overseer, and then, with the increased wage, he could buy a small cottage outside the smog belt. So, Arthur ran faster. He skipped lunch breaks, eating cold bread with grease-stained fingers while polishing brass. When his back spasmed in protest, he tightened his belt and worked standing up. When his eyes blurred from the intricate detail work under dim gaslight, he splashed cold, rusty water on his face and squinted harder. He was a machine made of flesh, fueled by the terrifying fear of poverty and the hopeful delusion of meritocracy. To his right worked a man named Julian. Julian was everything Arthur despised. Julian arrived exactly on time, never a minute early, and left the second the whistle screamed. Julian's gears were adequate. They passed inspection, but they lacked the mirror finish Arthur agonized over. Julian spent his lunch break smoking pipe, weed outside, chatting with the supply runners and the clerks from the logistics office. He laughed often. A sound that grated on Arthur's nerves like sand in a bearing. "You're gonna burn out, Artie," Julian said one afternoon, leaning against Arthur's workbench, watching him furiously file a burr off a cog. "The metal doesn't care how much you love it." "It's not about the metal," Arthur grunted, not looking up, sweat dripping from his nose onto the hot brass. "It's about the standard. The foreman sees the numbers, he sees the quality. When the promotion comes, it won't be the man smoking outside who gets it." Julian shrugged, blowing a smoke ring that drifted lazily toward the vents. "The foreman sees gears, Arthur. He doesn't see the blood you put into them. You're digging a hole and calling it a ladder." Arthur ignored him. He viewed Julian's attitude as a disease, the laziness that kept men poor. Arthur worked harder that week to compensate for Julian's apathy. He doubled his output. His hands developed calluses so thick he could pick up hot coals without flinching. He went home to his small, drafty room in the tenements, too exhausted to cook, too tired to dream. He simply slept the black sleep of the dead, only to rise and do it all again. Years bled into one another. The gray in Arthur's beard began to outnumber the black. The ache in his lower back became a permanent companion, a dull roar that never ceased. He had saved money, strictly and religiously, placing copper coins into a tin box under his floorboards. But Oakhaven was a cruel mistress. Every time his tin box grew heavy, the price of bread rose. The rent for his tenement hiked up. The cost of coal for his stove doubled during the freeze. He was running at a full sprint just to stay in the exact same place. Then came the day of the great expansion. The owner of the foundry, a man named Sterling whom Arthur had only seen in paintings, announced a new contract with the Royal Navy. They needed a new type of engine, and they needed a head of production to oversee the new wing of the factory. This was it, the moment. The prophecy Arthur had whispered to himself for 15 years. He arrived at the foundry an hour early that day, his boots polished, his apron scrubbed. He stood by his station, surrounded by thousands of perfect gears he had crafted over the years. He knew his production numbers were the highest in the district. He knew his defect rate was 0. He was the perfect worker. The foreman, a large man with a red face and a clipboard, walked onto the floor, accompanied by Mr. Sterling himself. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs like a piston. He straightened his back, ignoring the sharp stab of pain in his spine. They walked down the aisle, inspecting the roads. Mr. Sterling picked up one of Arthur's gears. The brass gleamed. "Exquisite work," Sterling murmured. "Truly, the tolerance on this is masterwork." Arthur beamed, a rare smile cracking his tired face. "Thank you, sir. I treat every piece as if it were my own." "Good. Very good," Sterling said, placing the gear back down. He looked at the foreman. "This man is indispensable on the line. We can't afford to move him. If we lose his output, the quality average drops significantly." The foreman nodded, scribbling a note. "Agreed, sir. He's the backbone of the floor." Then, they took 2 steps to the right, to Julian's bench. Julian was not polishing gears. He was showing the logistics clerk a sketch on a scrap of parchment. "What is this?" Sterling asked. "Just a thought, sir," Julian said, his voice calm, lacking the desperate tremble Arthur felt. "I've been talking to the supply runners. We spend 4 hours a day hauling raw brass from the South Depot. If we installed a gravity-fed chute from the upper window, we could cut transport time by 80%. We wouldn't need to work faster than just be there." Sterling's eyes lit up. He snatched the paper. "A chute. Simple. Cost-effective. It eliminates the need for 3 haulers. I also noticed," Julian continued, "that we waste 30% of our fuel keeping the furnaces hot during shift changes. If we staggered the lunch breaks, the furnaces would never cool down, saving us about 5,000 coins a year in coal." Sterling looked at Julian, not at his hands, which were soft, but at his mind. "You understand the flow, not just the hammer." "I like to look at the whole machine, sir." Julian smiled. "You're the new head of production," Sterling said, clapping Julian on the shoulder. "Come with us to the office. We need to discuss this chute idea immediately." Arthur stood frozen. The noise of the factory seemed to drop away, leaving a high-pitched ringing in his ears. He watched them walk away. Julian, the man who took long breaks, the man who produced average gears, was being led up the iron stairs to the glass wath above the smog. Arthur looked down in his hands. They were scarred, burnt, and misshapen from years of loyal, perfect, agonizing labor. He had done everything right. He had worked harder than anyone. He had sacrificed his time, and his joy. And his reward was that he was too good to be promoted. He had made himself a vital cog in the machine, and a machine does not promote a cog that fits perfectly, it keeps it there until it breaks. A dark, cold realization washed over him, heavier than any anvil he had ever lifted. Hard work was not the path to wealth. Hard work was the glue that held the wealthy man's dream together. He wasn't building his own tower. He was merely laying the bricks for someone else to stand on. He sank onto his stool, the file slipping from his numb fingers and clattering onto the floor. For the first time in 15 years, Arthur Vane did not pick it up. He just stared at the relentless, spinning machinery, finally understanding that the system was designed to consume his effort, not reward it. He was a master of his craft, but a slave to his wage. And as he sat there, the weight of a wasted life pressing down on his chest, a shadow fell over his bench. It wasn't the foreman. It was an old man from the cleaning crew, a man Arthur had ignored for a decade. The old man leaned in, his eyes sharp and clear amidst the grime. "You figured it out, didn't you?" "Son," the old man whispered, his voice like dry leaves. "You figured out that you can't dig your way out of a hole when you're the one holding the shovel." Arthur looked up, tears of rage and exhaustion pricking his eyes. "I did everything right." "You did everything you were told was right," the old man corrected. "There is a difference. The rich don't sell their labor, Arthur, they sell solutions. They sell systems. You are selling your time, and time is the only thing you can never buy back." The old man placed a small, strange-looking iron key on Arthur's bench. It didn't look like it fit any door in the factory. "I've been watching you. You have the discipline of a saint, but the strategy of a mule. If you want to see what's actually at the top of that tower, you need to stop climbing and start building an elevator. Meet me at the abandoned clock tower at midnight. Bring nothing but your anger." The old man shuffled away, dissolving into the steam, leaving Arthur staring at the key. The whistle blew for the end of the shift. For the first time, Arthur didn't stay late to finish his batch. He stood up, stripped off his heavy leather apron, and let it drop to the floor. It hit the ground with a heavy thud, sounding like a dead body. He walked out into the gray twilight of Oak Haven, the key burning a hole in his pocket, his heart pounding not with the rhythm of work, but with the terrifying rhythm of change. He was done bleeding for pennies. But he had no idea that the price of freedom would be higher than the price of labor. The wind howled through the skeletal remains of the clock tower, whistling through gaps in the brickwork where mortar had long since turned to dust. Arthur climbed the spiral stairs, his legs burning, the heavy iron key clutching warm in his palm. At the top, amidst the pigeon feathers and the moonlight slicing through the shattered clock face, stood the old man. He wasn't wearing his cleaning rags. He wore a faded velvet coat, moth-eaten but undeniably regal, and he was tinkering with the massive, rusted escapement of the tower's dead clock. "You came," the old man said without turning. "Most don't. Most go home, drink a pint of all to numb the sting, and go back to the anvil the next morning because the evil they know is safer than the dark they don't." "Who are you?" Arthur asked, his voice echoing in the hollow space. "I am Lias," the man said, wiping grease from his hands that were smooth, Arthur noticed, not scarred like his own. "And I used to own the foundry you work in, before Sterling. Before I forgot the rule I'm about to teach you." Arthur stepped closer, shock warring with skepticism. "You owned it. Then why are you sweeping its floors?" "Because I stopped building and started working," Elias said sharply. He pointed to the massive main gear of the clock. "Look at this. This giant wheel drives all the smaller ones. If this wheel turns once, the little cogs down below have to spin 1,000 times just to keep up. You, Arthur, are a little cog. You spin until you break, and the machine replaces you. The wealthy, they are the hand that wins the clock." Elias walked over to a dusty chalkboard set up against the bricks. He drew a simple line. "You trade time for money," Elias lectured, his voice gaining strength. "That is a trap. You have a finite amount of time. You can only work 16 hours a day before you die. Therefore, your wealth has a ceiling. It is capped by your biology." He drew a circle above the line. "The wealthy do not trade time. They trade value. They build systems that work while they sleep." Julian didn't get promoted because he worked harder. He got promoted because he created a system, that works without him. He detached his income from his sweat. Arthur felt a vertigo that had nothing to do with the height of the tower. "But I have no systems, I have no money to build a factory. I have a tin box of copper coins and a bad back. You have the knowledge," Elias countered. "You know the transmission gears better than anyone. You know they overheat, you know they wobble. Why? Because the alloy is too soft." Arthur answered instantly. "The lubrication point's a manual. A man has to oil them every hour, or they seize." "And if they didn't need oiling?" Elias asked, his eyes gleaming. "You'd need a self-lubricating casing, a pressurized reservoir built into the hub. Can you build it?" Arthur hesitated. I've sketched it in my head 1,000 times. But I'd need materials, I'd need time, I'd have to quit the foundry, I'd have to use my savings. If it fails I starve, I'll be on the street in a month." Elias stepped close, gripping Arthur's shoulder. "Arthur. You are just eating slowly. The risk isn't in trying. The risk is staying exactly where you are and praying the world suddenly decides to be kind. It won't." Arthur went home that night and did the unthinkable. He pried up the floorboards. He took the tin box, heavy with the copper tears of 20 years of labor. He didn't go to work the next morning. Nor the next. He rented a small, damp shade on the edge of the iron district. He bought high-grade brass, steel files. He worked, but this time, the pain was different. It wasn't the dull ache of slavery, it was the sharp, terrifying burn of creation. He wasn't renting his time anymore. He was investing it. For 3 weeks he barely slept. He built the prototype of the Vane hub, a gear system with an internal pressurized oil reservoir. It didn't need a worker to tend to it. It didn't ran silent and cold. When his money ran out, he ate stale crusts. When his coal ran low, he burned his old furniture. He was terrified. The silence of the shed was louder than the roar of the foundry. There was no foreman to tell him he was doing well. There was only the cold reality of the market waiting to judge him. Finally, it was done. A single, gleaming unit. Arthur washed the grease from his face, put on his only suit, and walked back to the foundry. He didn't go to the workers' entrance. He walked to the front gate, the one reserved for clients. The guard tried to stop him. "Arthur, shift started 3 hours ago. You're fired, you know. Foreman's been screaming for weeks." "I'm not here for a shift," Arthur said, clutching the heavy device wrapped in burlap. "I'm here to see Mr. Sterling." "He won't see you. Tell him I have the solution to the overheating problem on the Navy engines. Tell him I can save him 10,000 coins a month." The guard blinked, then picked up the telephone. 10 minutes later, Arthur stood in the glass office overlooking the floor. The air was cool and smelled of mahogany and expensive tobacco. Mr. Sterling sat behind a massive desk. Julian, now wearing a crisp suit, stood by the window. You have some nerve, Vane, Sterling said not unkindly. You abandon your post and now you waltz in here. I should have you arrested for trespassing. Arthur didn't apologize. He didn't bow. He unwrapped the burlap and placed the Vane hub on the polished desk. This, Arthur said, his voice steady, is a self-lubricating transmission hub. It requires zero maintenance for 5 years. It runs at double the RM of your current gears without heating up. Julian stepped forward, picking it up. He spun the mechanism. It was silent. Frictionless. Julian looked at Arthur. His understood immediately. It works, Julian whispered to Sterling. If we put these in the Navy engines, we don't need maintenance crews. We can run the engines 24 hours a day. Sterling leaned forward, the predator waking up in his eyes. Impressive. Very impressive, Arthur. You're a good man. I'll tell you what, I'll hire you back. Double your old wage. And I'll give you a bonus of 50 coins for the design. We'll take the patent. The old Arthur would have wept with gratitude. The old Arthur would have taken the security, the pat on the head, the good job. But Arthur felt the weight of the key Elias had given him in his pocket. He thought of the tin box. He thought of the 20 years he had sold for pennies. No, Arthur said. The room went silent. Excuse me, Sterling frowned. I don't want a job, Arthur said. And I'm not selling the design. I have already filed the patent this morning. He hadn't, but he knew he needed to bluff. He saw Sterling flinch. I am proposing a contract, Arthur continued, his heart thundering against his ribs like a war drum. I will license the Vane hub to you. You will pay me 5 coins for every unit you manufacture. And I retain the rights to sell it to other foundries. That's extortion, Sterling snapped. I can just copy it. You can, Arthur said. And I will go to the Royal Navy directly and tell them you are using a stolen, inferior knockoff of a patented safety device. They take intellectual property very seriously. It was the biggest gamble of his life. He was a flea threatening a lion. Sterling stared at him for a long, agonizing minute. Then, he looked at the gear. He looked at the potential profits from the Navy contract. He did the math. The rich always do the math. 2 coins per unit. Sterling countered. And exclusive rights for 1 year. 4 coins, Arthur said. And you get 6 months exclusivity. 3 coins, Sterling said. Deal, Arthur extended his hand. Deal. Arthur walked out of that office not as an employee, but as a partner. He walked down the iron stairs, past the sweating, groaning workers. He saw his old bench. He saw a new man standing there, sweating, hammering, trying to file the brass perfectly, hoping for a promotion. Arthur felt a pang of sympathy, but also a fierce, burning pride. He'd realized the lie he had been told his entire life. The world doesn't pay you for how hard you work. It pays you for how hard it is to replace you. As a worker, Arthur was easily replaced by anyone with 2 hands. As the owner of the patent, as the creator of the solution, he was irreplaceable. 6 months later, Arthur bought the cottage far above the smog. He didn't wake up to an alarm. He woke up when the sun hit his face. He drank coffee on his porch, listening to the birds. While down below in the city, the machines hummed. And every time a gear spun in the darkness of the foundry, a coin dropped into Arthur's pocket. He wasn't rich because he worked harder than the man next to him. He was rich because he had stopped digging the hole and started building the ladder. Hard work is a virtue, yes. But hard work without leverage is a tragedy. Don't just be the best at swinging the hammer. Own the house you are building. If this story opened your eyes to the game being played around you, subscribe to Daily Motivation Tales for more tales that challenge the way you see the world. The systems are waiting for you to break them.